Hello and welcome to the Fundamentals of Lute Playing. My name is Laudon Schuett, and today we are going to talk about our first ornament, our first grace, our first agrément. This is going to be a sort of introduction to how we play and incorporate ornamentation into our music. If you're an absolute beginner, I'm not going to be expecting you to be adding ornaments into any of the pieces we're working on here in the beginning, but I am going to give you some basic exercises to kind of get you working and thinking about it. For those of you who are more advanced, this will be an opportunity to learn about maybe some things you've already done in other musical styles and other contexts and how you're going to incorporate it. Now, our very first grace that we're going to learn is we are going to learn the shake. And all the shake is, if you're an experienced musician, is it's a mordant. And it can be played as a normal mordant, an inverted mordant, whatever. Now, for those of you who are like, what is he talking about? I'll give you an example. So let's say I have a line of music and I'm going... I'm going to add a grace onto that second to last note. So here's how it's going to work. And you'll notice I just this little twiddle, to call them little twiddles. So if you're a classical guitar player, it's a mordant. And I also could have done it the other way. So just for the beginners, what I did was I plucked the second fret note, which is an A, once. And then I didn't do any more plucking with the right hand. I used the left hand to hammer down onto the third fret, and then pull off to the second. And don't freak out. I'm going to talk about all of that toward the end of the lesson and how you're going to start working on building up that left hand mechanism. But the important thing to remember is when we're playing graces, we are doing one pluck and the rest is done with the left hand. There's another type of ornamentation called embellishment. An embellishment, you pluck every single note of the ornamentation. And we'll talk about embellishment down the road. You'll kind of have already been doing it without realizing it if you've been playing the two pieces that I handed out. But for now, we're going to just focus on learning this one grace. And so the shake, again, what we've got is this basic line. And we're adding a little grace there. And I could do it I could also go 2, open, 2. Now, I generally like the sound of the ornament so that it doesn't include the next note that I'm going to play, but there are certainly scenarios where it's clear that they did that. So I'm going to show you the alternate version here. So we go 4, 3, 2, 1, and I won't talk this time. And some of the challenges arise when we do this on the courses, making it nice and clear. And even. Now, this ornament, this grace, can be a half step. It can be a whole step. Some of you with good ears may have noticed that the first version is a half step and the second version is a whole step. As long as it's in key, let's say I didn't have the B flat or the third fret here. Let's say I went... Definitely changes the key there, so you'll have to take a second to get used to it, but you could certainly do that. And I do think there may even be some scenarios where it's wider than a step, especially if you're playing Scottish music and some of those other things. It's really hard to take those bagpipe intervals out of my ear when I'm playing some of the Scottish rap. So I do think there is an opportunity for wider intervals as well. Situations where maybe the previous note was open and then you've got the grace written on a note that's high up. Something like that, or... So how do we write this? I'm going to show you. I am going to make sure it's always written the same way. So it's this little, looks like a hashtag or a sharp, if you know your standard music notation. And it's written under or to the side, sometimes on top, of the note that you're doing the ornament on. Italian tablature tends to be less ornamented than the English manuscript sources, but they definitely use them, and you will see ornaments in them. So don't think that when you open your Italian manuscripts, facsimiles, and you don't see any ornamentation. They certainly did it. I just think they were less inclined to write it in from all my reading. And they do occasionally use different symbols. I can think of Capirola has a little dotted note and then these two dots that go to the side to indicate what kind of mordant they want. So you do have to think about the source that you're reading from, and sometimes, like with Capirola, actually in his preface, he talks about how to play the two different ornaments. For our purposes, for our lessons, I'm going to use the same grace notation so that everybody's kind of getting comfortable with that. So in this case, it's going to look like a little hashtag, a little sharp. And just as a reminder, so embellishment is when we add notes and we pluck all of the notes that are being added. And those generally take up time. I actually put an example here. So we have open D going to G. So let's say you're playing a piece of music and you play an open D, and then you play a G, and you want to fill out that space. You could go like that. So instead of just going, you could fill that out. That type of ornamentation is called a division or embellishment, and we pluck each note with the right hand. And that differs from the grace, which the motion is done primarily after the initial pluck with the left hand. There are other graces. The most common used in the Renaissance are called falls or back falls. The French call the pourdevoir, which is an ascending appoggiatura. Those are appoggiaturas. We're going to talk about those later. We're not going to add those in just yet. For those of you who are beginners, you're like, what is an appoggiatura? Don't worry about it right now. You will either run into that if you're doing your Artusi lessons that I recommended in a previous lesson, or you'll have to wait and we'll talk about it as a separate lesson. So don't worry, we'll get into that. For those of you who are absolute beginners, let me give you a couple little exercises, but do understand that I'm not expecting you to add ornamentation into any of your pieces yet. I mean, you can wait as long as you want before adding it in. Our next piece is going to I'm going to put a couple ornaments in there. It's a treble of green sleeves from the Folger manuscript, and it's going to open with a little, just this little thing. And you could totally just play it. Just take the ornament out, and that's not a problem at all. I think there is a tendency when people learn about ornamentation, they go, oh, I need to add all of these ornaments. But there were definitely people in the 16th century and early 17th century who preferred less ornamentation. I think people were complicated back then like they are today, and they have their preferences. So don't feel like you need to add ornamentation just yet. But I am going to give you, the beginner, a couple of exercises to start working on the skills you need to play the ornaments down the road. And ironically, I actually think the appoggiaturas, the pourdevoir, the falls are easier for beginners to do than the shakes that I was showing in the beginning of this video. So that will be another element that we add down the road. For beginners, what I want you to do is put your first finger on the 5th fret of the first string. And all you're going to do is you're going to pluck this string. And what I want you to practice doing is you're going to take your second finger and you're going to hammer it down onto the 6th fret. And you'll hear the sound. And what I would avoid doing is moving the fingers really far away. Instead, what I would do is keep the finger really close and drop it down. And you can practice this in different positions if you'd like. Just doing this little hammer on like that. And what I would watch out for is getting into a situation where you're gripping really, really, really hard and you're sort of squeezing the instrument and tensing up. I think what I want you to think more about is accuracy. So making sure that that second finger hits the string down into the wood. And what people do is they mess up a couple times and then they start trying to slam their finger down and do that. But try to stay relaxed and just think about being as accurate as possible. And again, this is something, if you find yourself getting tense, try it without the thumb on the back. And really see how controlled you can be. It should not be something that's really, really tense, but you may miss a lot in the beginning. You may find it challenging. You may end up turning your hand a little bit like this to kind of make things easier, but I would try to make sure that we keep that parallel position. Okay? And then the next thing you're going to do, and I'm going to move these fingers out of the way, but I normally don't, is you're going to put both fingers down. You're going to put your second finger down on the 6th fret and your fifth finger down on, your first finger down on the 5th fret. And you're going to pluck, and then you're going to pull the second finger off so that what we hear is the note behind it. And again, I'm plucking once with the right hand, just like that. Okay? And what we want to do when we pull off on this first string, it actually doesn't matter too much on the chanterelle because it's a single string. But we're just pulling down and a little bit out. And make sure that you're not turning your whole hand or doing a gigantic movement. I'm literally just moving my fingertip. I'm just bringing it in to get that. Slurs, these legatos, these hammer-ons and pull-offs, whatever you want to call them, they're not a big part of playing Renaissance lute, but they are incorporated into these little ornaments. And if you're coming from a classical guitar background, it's a breeze. It's so easy because you've spent so much time working on your slurs. But if you're an absolute beginner, this may be something that takes a lot of time. And I may need to do a video just for beginners where we really get into some of these slur exercises. But for now, I want you to keep it very, very simple. You're just working on hammering on or pulling off. Also known as an ascending legato or a descending legato. So descending, which is the pull off, or ascending, which is the hammer on. Okay? And once you're really, really comfortable doing that, you can combine the two. And we're just staying on the first string because there are some added difficulties when doing the courses versus the single string. What you do then after that is you just combine them. So you just go hammer on, pull off. And you're just going to do it very slowly. And you'll notice I'm not doing this with my hand. I'm not going like that, because then that pulls our fingers away from the fingerboard. It knocks us out of good position, and we're going to have to make our way back if we're doing music. So even when you're doing it slowly, make sure that the motion is in the finger. Okay? And understand that on the lute, your hammer-ons are not going to be quite as audible if you've played a little guitar as they are on the guitar. It's just the nature of the beast. And what you'll do is just, over a couple of days, start to speed it up a little. Till it feels like one motion. Now, if you do decide to go down to the second string and start playing around with that, just know that when you hammer on and pull off, when you pull off, you're not going to go straight down toward the floor like this, but you're going to come out toward the wall that you're facing. So like this, and just a little bit down toward the floor. And the reason for that is you'll get stuck if you're pulling down, and it will also cause an additional accent. These are very light ornaments, and we don't want them to be like super loud and strong. So if you are coming from a classical guitar background and you're thinking, that you want that really punchy, accented thing. This is a little different. These are very light. We often just call them the twiddles. So, and there are, you know, you could practice doing a couple rotations. And then the next logical step, of course, is to work on your other fingers. These things are going to be very rare, though. Like I said, the places I most often like to use these bigger intervals is maybe in the Scottish repertoire, where I just hear, if I'm listening to a Hunts Up tune or something like that, I just hear the bagpipes. I hear the bagpipes and I go, oh my gosh, we need, you know, and then it's set up so that you just have this wider interval. So like 1 to 4. So I think for beginners, though, the most useful distance is going to be 1 to 2 and then 1 to 3. And you could then eventually take that. But put in the time in the beginning to make sure that you're not doing this sort of stuff, where your entire arm is moving and your entire hand is moving. If you can really just take the time. And remember what I talked about in the how to practice video, which is don't get frustrated. Turn it into a game and enjoy working out this little puzzle. And just know that, like, if you have questions or you're really struggling with it, well, put a comment on the video. You know, I'm usually pretty available. I usually get back. So put a comment and say, oh, I'm really struggling. Can you give some more tips? Like I said, I have a feeling that I'm going to need to do a more comprehensive video on this technique. I think a lot of times I've gotten used to lute players being sort of coming from the guitar world, so they've already got it worked out, but I don't want to leave the absolute beginners in the dust. So I do think down the road I'm going to do a more comprehensive legato or slurring video. So this is just to get you started. I hope you all found this useful. If you have any questions about this grace, the shake that we're going to be adding in, please let me know. And again, we're going to cover other ornaments, other graces down the road, but I just want to do one at a time and let people kind of get used to it. So have fun playing around with some of these exercises. If you're a more advanced player and you want to take the pieces from our first pieces that I sent out and add some ornaments in, you could totally do that. I think that's a blast. Or you can go look at the original facsimiles and manuscripts and see what ornaments I took out when I set those for you guys. But I think the next lesson is I'm going to be presenting you with the next piece, and that will have some ornamentation written in it. But just as a reminder, if you're an absolute beginner, you can completely ignore this video, or you can just watch it and enjoy it. Don't even worry about playing any of these things yet. You can say, I'm not ready, and that's totally fine. Your music is still going to sound great. So happy practicing, happy luting. I'll see you in the next episode. Remember, if you're enjoying this series and you want to help support it, best thing you can do is subscribe. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you for the next lesson. Bye.